Hello, my friends. Um, Something interesting here. Let's take a look at some predictive programming. Um, I recently, for some strange reason, I don't know why, just this movie popped into my head. I don't know why it did, but um, I just decided I was going to watch it again. I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. I didn't think so. I did find a lot of other very interesting connections, but um, that would take a whole another video. But this is just in particular kind of, like I said, it's been about a month, but stuff that just recently happened kind of sparked something. And I remembered some things that I saw in there. And so I went back and kind of dug in a little to see if there was anything to what I was looking at. And it's definitely interesting. Uh, what exactly it means, who knows? But it is certainly something worth looking at. So we'll just run through it quickly. So just in general, we're talking about like predictive programming. It's kind of just the idea that if there's a group that is intentionally trying to create propaganda or is trying to influence a large group of people, one method is if you show them the idea before it happens, and you do it in a way that really conveys it as something that is just very fictional. It's kind of the idea of getting out in front of something. If you know that the public, if you're a position of power and you know that the public is about to learn something about you that you've been doing that's not going to be well received, and there's going to be backlash involved, they're going to get out in front of it, meaning they're actually going to be the first one to present it or mention of it so that they can control the narrative of what it looks like before somebody else has a chance to really unload the bag. So they know they're going to take a hit, but if they move first, they get to make the first move, and then they can at least take control of the narrative. From there, they can just spin back and forth. So the idea of that basically in predictive programming, that if you know that there is some event or something that is going to be coming, whether because you're the one planning it, another parallel to that is people are familiar with firefighters every blue moon that have this kind of sinister hero complex where they'll actually go out and start a fire just so they can be the ones that show up and put it out and save somebody. So there's different variations of this that we are aware of, but this particular, if you know that something is going to happen at some point, and you can create a very fictional presentation of that and present it through a movie or a TV show or, years ago in theater, anything that people would consider entertainment. And whatever they're seeing is just there for entertainment value, it's just fictional. So you can tie a lot of stuff into that. And then, fast forward down the road, 10 years later, something actually occurs in the world, and the first default in the mind is you've seen this before and it was fiction. So your first default position is going to be, well, that's Hollywood, that's fiction. That can't be what I'm looking at, it must be something else. And of course, then you get a narrative or a storyline that goes a different direction. So just another misdirection, and like I said, I just gave some examples of how you see this otherwise, and there's lots of examples of this. I'll probably do several of these, in the future on certain films, certain series, certain somethings, music albums, the covers of albums, that at the time you wouldn't have known anything one way or another, but if you fast forward 5 or 6 years, events have occurred in the world, and you can look back at that and see symbols all over that showing that idea. And you can kind of go backwards to confirm, okay, well, somebody might have been aware of this. And at that point, you have to start deciding if people are planning these things and carrying them out, creating chaos in order to solve it. So, anyway, just to kind of elaborate on that idea a little bit. But really, this is the movie that I went back and watched again. So, this is basically part 2 of Wizard of Oz. And this is based on a book. There's a series of books that were written about Oz by the same author. But this second addition to the story was published in 1907. Okay? 1907. So, I mean, we're talking well over 100 years ago. All right? So, notes here. These are kind of the main characters on the cover, and here's the scene with kind of the, them all in play. But let's just take a look at kind of what this thing is based on. Like I said, it's based on a book. The book's Ozma of Oz. This gal here. So like I said, published July 30th, 1907, series of Oz books. So the reason that it struck a note for me was that we recently saw that the House or Congress passed a TikTok ban for the app in the United States. And I personally, I'm not on it. I've never had the app. I've never downloaded it. But I am familiar. And I have seen a lot of interesting things coming through TikTok onto other channels in a way. And I have very much seen that there's a lot of content that has been scrubbed or removed from YouTube and mainstream sources over the last 4 years or so. And through that resource of TikTok, a lot of that information is just getting right back out into the public. And there's definitely some people that are not cool with that, and they do not want that. So I'm definitely all aware that there's a lot of really silly things that go on there, and probably, I mean, it's no different than what YouTube used to be in that sense, or still is. I mean, there's no shortage of unbelievably foolish and stupid things going through YouTube. So it doesn't really vary in that way. There's still people saying kind of whatever they want to say, and they have a right to do so. So I'm not saying it's a great thing. I'm not saying it's not. But just as kind of an impartial observer, I see the benefit of it and what it is doing for the people who don't trust, mainstream sources. And it doesn't mean you believe everything you see through that resource either, but it is a channel in a sense that you can find all sorts of information that you will not ever see on your TV or on any of the mainstream narrative newses. It's not going to be there. So for those who don't want to get all their information just from the mainstream sources, a lot of people go there to find alternative news and use it as a resource. And they should be able to do that if they want to. There's no reason they shouldn't be able to do that. So again, I'm not a user, but I do understand that there's a much bigger play at hand. We're dealing with the rights of people in this country to express free speech in a way, and that's a problem. So that's the reason I'm only have an interest from that perspective, that there's a lot of nonsense, but there's also a lot of good, and people should be able to have the right to choose for themselves what information they want to take in and what they want to believe, because they will anyway. just like they will reviewing anything else from any other resource. So that's why it kind of brings this to my attention. And I just, like I said, happened to watch this recently. But what I realized when I noticed is, if you look back here, this character here is kind of our key note, right here. So within the book, that character's name is Tick-Tock. So I remembered that. So I wanted to first go back and make sure there's not any other application of this in spelling, or that's very common. It could be. So I just went back and did a little more research, and all right. So essentially, it's basically what we would expect. You know, what is the sound of the clock called? In English, it would be referred to as tick-tock, Ticktock. All right. So that's what we would expect it to mean. Another variation of that is, in terminology, is something to be done and there is a time limit, or time is running out. So like sand through the hourglass, time is expiring, click, tick-tock, the clock is ticking. So the idea that we're running out of time. So, and that's what we would really expect, and that's pretty general. So I didn't find anything outside of that, as far as especially regarding the spelling of that. So, in general, it's a sound created by a clock, or a figure of speech implying that time is running out. So with that, let's connect some dots. So in the plot of this movie, or the book, it was adapted to film in 1985. But this book, 1907, Dorothy, again, for the second time, through a natural phenomenon. This time it's kind of a hurricane event that takes her to Oz via sea. Last time it was a tornado from Kansas, right? So, main important part here is the characters that are accompanying her as she gets to Oz this time. So, she finds, there's a handful of characters, not so important for what we're looking at here, but they also find a clockwork man named Tick-Tock. And notice the spelling and how it's arranged there. And this is noted that one of the first intelligent humanoid automations in literature at all. So in all of literature at this time, this is one of the first mentionings whatsoever of an intelligent humanoid automated. Okay? So important. That right there. That joins them on their journey. Tick-Tock informs Dorothy that in the land of Ev, which is Oz, but because right now they currently do not have a competent ruler, its king having committed suicide after selling his family to the Gnome King. So Oz is now land of Ev because the king is dead and there is now a false king occupying the throne. So they don't have a competent ruler. The true king committed suicide because he sold his family to the Gnome King. So selling children, wife, family in exchange for things and eventually committing suicide. Well, you can connect your own dots on that part because we can, a number of real life scenarios where we're pretty sure somebody sold a family member in order to get something for it, and they eventually killed themselves because of the guilt. So take with that what you will. But there is also, in addition to the Gnome King, there's a princess there. There's an evil princess, and she has many exchangeable, detachable heads. So she's essentially a cyborg, and she's got a collection of many what appear living heads of beautiful women, and because she's old and just has this hybrid body now, she just picks whichever head she wants for the day based on her appearance and just basically screws it on. So, a transhuman witch woman, who is the princess in this evil version of Oz, run by the Gnome King. So, connect your dots there, merging humans and robots, and all the things available for you to know about that at this time. But that's really more of a side note. But that's basically how the situation got to where it is. So now, TikTok, the fictional mechanical man, has been termed the prototype robot, and is widely considered to be one of the first robots to appear in modern literature. Okay? So, this character is the first reference of an intelligent prototype robot. AI, if you will. So, in the storyline, TikTok is a round-bodied mechanical man made of copper that runs on clockwork springs, right? So, that implies where he gets his name from. He gets his name because his inner workings are that of a clock, and so it makes the sounds a clock would make, so that gives him his name, TikTok. But like we looked at earlier, TikTok, regarding the context of a clock, is T-I-C-K, T-O-C-K. And do your own research on this. I looked. I did not find any reference or spelling of this in any reference regarding sounds of a clock. This spelling, T-I-K, T-O-K, is not applied. So, if he got his name, TikTok, based on a clock function, why was it intentionally spelled this way? So, interesting point there. Let's look at a little more about what his character plays and the symbolism of his role in the actual book. So, TikTok is not alive and feels no emotions. He therefore have no more love or be loved than a sewing machine. But, as a servant, he is utterly truthful and loyal. Describes himself as a slave to Dorothy and defers to her. So, like we said, his character is based on a clock, which this is our spelling for clock. But it's this. And we know what we refer to this as. I mean, this is the application in question. But this book is written in 1907. That's very strange to me. So within this book, the character of TikTok, the robot, was created during the reign of the good king. So when Oz was still good. And he even led the king's army. So they discuss that in the book. So he was part of the Royal Emerald Army or whatever it was of Oz. So after the good king was deceived and turned bad, and evil took over, the robot was shut down, and the kingdom started to be destroyed. Evil was taking over, and TikTok was shut down. However, he contained technology and data that was stored within his system waiting for Dorothy to return to Oz to help and inform her of the truth of what had happened. He warns her that the throne is empty, occupied by false rulers, and he vows to serve her wishes truthfully and loyally. So that is essentially the character of this TikTok character in this book from 1907. So, in summary, an intelligent humanoid robot named TikTok was attempted to be shut down when overtaken by evil, eventually loyally provides the truth to Dorothy to help her avoid deception and helps her eventually take back over the kingdom to the good side. Okay? So, in a nutshell of what his character represents, he's a benevolent character in this regard, and is highly important in this film because nothing could have happened without that particular individual being involved. So, a lot of parallels with that. So let's look at what does this apply to right now, over 100 years later, this. And clearly, same spelling. Okay. And it was just passed in the House to ban this thing. And some of the reasonings have been because of it creates an addictiveness of its constant scrolling. So we know, if you've done a little research, they have found that this scrolling, or the swiping, actually has an addictive quality, and it makes people want to keep doing it. We get that. And also, because of it has a large potential to take personal data from millions of US users in China. So China collecting personal data on millions of Americans. These are two very specific mentions of what the problems are, why they want to do this. Okay, so addictiveness to its constant scrolling videos. You mean kind of like what we're on now? They don't have any issues with Facebook or Instagram or Snap. These are all like sit there and scroll, right? So these are all doing the exact same thing in regard to taking advantage of the scrolling addictive quality. And they've been doing it for much longer, and nobody seems to care. They're certainly not trying to shut them down. So does that answer really add up? No. Foreign data collection. Same thing. All of those mentioned, and then some, that we know 100%, and they've been caught sending data to China through these apps. People even taken before federal commissions regarding it on those exact same ones on the screen. Yet it's a problem now for the other app that's doing the exact same things. Yeah, that math is bad. That math don't add up. So, what does it really mean? There's a few directions you could go with it. But again, there's no shortage of mentions from things from this long ago, more recent, foreshadowing things. And sometimes there is somebody that knows of old literature. When they go to create something, they create it with that in mind. Or it's all just part of the narrative that's been written in advance, and they're just using the foreshadowing as predictive programming. So that when this happens, everybody just thinks it's something organic. It can't have anything to do with something else. But a book from over 100 years ago used the same spelling for this character and outlined it as a very competent, intelligent, humanoid robot capable of providing very truthful and loyal application to its user. Now, do I think that that's 100% what they're trying to do on the other end of TikTok? Highly unlikely. But if you step back far enough to look at the symbolism, you can kind of see the parallels here, which is a little strange. And, I don't know. That's just sometimes the things that I go, when I notice the things that I see, because I consume a lot of information. So there's a lot of dots in the chest, and sometimes I see something, and I just go back into that chest, pull another dot out, and all of a sudden, I find some things that are interesting. So I just thought that was strange, and probably needed a little bit more investigation, and of course, do with it what you will. But I definitely thought it was worth taking a look at. So again, y'all have a wonderful evening or day, and remember to do your own research. Don't trust in anything that's just being presented to you. Most of the information, and if it's propaganda, if it's not real, scratch it a little bit, and you'll see right through it. So, peace and love, my friends.